Our next speaker, Lakshmi Pratury, brought TED to India in 2009 when the first TED India conference was held in Mysore. She also curated and hosted the first INC, that is Innovation and Knowledge Conference, an education-centered spin-off of TED in India. Lakshmi also founded the Digital Equalizer program, which brought technology education to over 100,000 children and 2,000 teachers in India. She started out studying math, technology, business, and theater. And now she's known as a social entrepreneur who knows how to get things done. Forbes Asia listed Lakshmi Pratury as one of the 100 most powerful women in the region. We are absolutely thrilled to welcome Lakshmi to TEDxASB.
You know, India, as a country, as a culture, as a community, it's not easy to understand. You know, the first thing that strikes me, you know, I've been out of India longer than I've been here. So I look at it from every point of view, both as an Indian and as an American. And the first thing that strikes you is its dichotomy. You know, there's the superbly rich and the slum dwellers living next to each other. Then there is the highly educated and the high rate of literacy. And in the 180 plus countries that exist in this world, India is in the top 2% in economic indicators and bottom 25% in human index. So now, in human development index. So now you wonder, what is this dichotomy and what is it all about? So I feel that to understand India, I think you really need to understand its history. Now, India has been invaded by just about everybody. We know the English, but then there have been the Dutch, and not to mention the Indians themselves. There's the Guptas, the Mauryas, the Cholas, the Pandyas, you know, many, many, many. So my premise for this whole conversation today is that India, over the years, over centuries, has learned that war does not bring anything. The only way to existence, I'm not even talking about world peace and nice things, I'm just talking about survival. The only way to survival is nonviolence and acceptance. I mean, frankly, I sometimes wonder, how come when a slum dweller lives right next to a mansion, why isn't he or she angry? Why are they just allowing everything to happen? And I think it is this generations of acceptance ingrained in our DNA that violence doesn't get us anywhere. Now, if it doesn't get us anywhere, how do we keep moving on? And if you look at that, I feel that there is a sense of almost adherence. There's a sense of almost adhesive nature to its tradition, to what it is all about, that keeps you moving forward. Now, when I say tradition, what do I mean? Do I mean religious? Do I mean rituals? Absolutely not. To me, it really boils down to the three essential ingredients of life, and that's how this adherence moves on. In Hindi, it's called Roti, Kapda, or Makan. It's food, clothing, and shelter. It's the basic ingredients that are necessary for us. And what I'll do is I'll take you through each of these categories and tell you stories of people who are moving toward the modern life while taking their traditions along and how they are keeping the traditions alive. So the first thing is Roti. You know, Shashi Tharoor, who's an author, said in one of his books that India is not a melting pot. It's a thali. It's like every person who lives here keeps up their flavors, who they are, very fiercely till the demise when the food disappears into your mouth. Every dish remains incredibly different. It's hot, it's sour, it's sweet, it's salty. It's an assault on your senses, but it's not blended together. You have to take different pieces together, and the only time it comes together is in its demise. So it's a difference in the food. And if you think about it, the Indian food, if somebody is cooking it in their house, you can smell it 5 blocks down. It ain't no baked chicken that's like nicely, you know, you can just put some spray and it's gone. It stays in your clothes, in your hair, everywhere. It's like as though that tradition is wreaking havoc into the world around it saying, I am here and I'm not going anywhere and this is me. So I think the food is a very, very strong part of India. And I used to feel that when I first went to America, the rite of passage for everybody was that in a dorm or in your apartment, the fire alarm is set off at least once when you put the seasoning in your food. So it's just, that's just how Indian food is. So I'll give you an example of someone. So here we have this. Now, how can we enter any modern world? This is Abhishek Bhagat. He's a young kid who's going off to college, and he really misses his mom's homemade food. So what does he do? He creates this thing called Kitchen King, okay? And you see those things up on top? That's where you put all the ingredients you need. And here you put in the recipe his mom gave him, and he turns on the machine and voila, the food comes out tasting exactly like his mom made. And now he's come up with a prototype of a new machine called RoboCook. He changed the name. And he's taking it with him, so when he goes to college, he doesn't miss his mom's homemade food. So that's moving into modernity, taking your tradition along. And then, you know, there is things like Goli Vada Pav, which is very much a Bombay food, and it's going the McDonald's way, where they're taking these stalls everywhere to sell it. So I'll still give you this taste of the food that you get from your state, but it's available everywhere across India. And then the next thing is kapda, the clothing. You know, sari, it's a centuries-old piece of cloth. That's what it is. It's a piece of cloth. It's worn traditionally at least 25 different ways, okay? And it has survived many, many centuries. You know, tribal women may wear it, you know, a very 200 rupee sari with nothing else except that. And a fashionista can spend lakhs on putting the right accessories together. And so it gives you that kind of variety. Now here's the story of Mallesham. He's from the village of Pochampalli in Andhra Pradesh. And this is a silk sarees they weave there. And what he found when he was a kid in the 6th grade, he saw this is his mother, and there is this machine that actually has to prepare the yarn before it's woven, the design work is done. And the woman has to go back and forth, you know, just about 8,000 times she has to do it to prepare each sari. By the time the women are in their 30s, their shoulders just don't work anymore, just because, imagine doing this 8 hours every day. And he felt that that was a waste. That was not contributing to the design of Pochampalli. So he wanted to create a machine so that his mom doesn't have to do that. And here is a 7th grade failed guy and, you know, doing his family business. So every time he spent time trying to do this machine, everybody thought he was skipping work. And then they said, you know, you're being lazy. So he ran away from home and he got a job in a machine shop because he wanted to understand how machines work. And he worked for 7 years away from home, not seeing his parents. And he created this machine, which now automates that process. So he sells it for less than $800, which can be shared by about 10 families, so that the women in the entire region potentially don't have to do this kind of work. And he came back home. He lives with his family. He makes like few machines every month. He sells them in the neighborhood. They work with like microcredit, donations, etc., to give these machines that are shared by cooperatives of women. He's definitely moving into the modern world, and he's not forgotten where he has come from. Now about the Makan. Anupam Mishra is a person who is, I think, a Gandhian, not just a Gandhian, but one of the most amazing persons who talks about water conservation. He tells a story of how in Rajasthan, in the middle of the desert, they figured out how to have water all year long. Because if you look at this house, it just looks like a beautiful house. But it's a very smartly designed house. Because at the roof here, you see a little water spout. So when it rains, the water comes down here. And inside, there's a tube that goes down. And under all these houses are water tanks. So this water is conserved throughout the year, so that they get absolutely clean water all year round for them. And if you look at this house, it's beautifully done. It's painted, it's cow dung on the walls that gives that brown background, which also creates an antiseptic environment, and they paint on top of it. So the beauty and the tradition and the modern are all blended in the villages where most of our people live. We may see all glass and steel in the cities, but in the villages, they're still keeping the tradition along. And this is a person bringing the water, and basically it looks like these are empty. This is filled with water. The water is so clear that it feels like it's empty. And there's beauty. And if you look at this, these are stepwells where the water is filled, and when it's completely deprived of any water, even in that starkness, it's beautiful because it's designed that way. And this also gives a notice to the villagers that, okay, now the water is full, it's okay, you can maybe take a bath twice a day, but when the water is 2 steps down, you better start conserving water. These are all the things we had before, which we are not using anymore. So the tradition, the modernity, they all exist around us. Now, the next question people ask is, what's a business case? We talked about it, what is the shareholder value, how do we make sure we are successful, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll give you 3 examples of people who have actually done that and been successful. Most of them are known by you. Think about McDonald's. What is the DNA of McDonald's? Is beef burger. Imagine coming to India, not having a beef burger. Not only that, I have the chicken maharaj, to have a veggie burger. I mean, this is like anti-DNA for McDonald's to have anything vegetarian that tastes good. And to have something that tastes good and have 2 kitchens, one for vegetarian, one for non-vegetarian, completely separate. So where you heat the veggie burger is different than where you heat the non-veg burger. Now that is, you have to pay attention to the tradition and change. Otherwise, you don't survive. And so there is an icon. Now take KFC, another American brand. And they have here something called a special KFC. About 10% of their stores are called special KFC. You know what makes them special? Is that every person who works in that store, from the front all the way to the back end, are all hearing impaired people. They have taken on that they said 10% of India is hearing impaired. So they said 10% of our stores will be managed by hearing impaired people. And so they put a sign language in every store, so the customers can also learn to interact with them. And you actually order by pointing instead of talking. And instead of when something is done, usually the microwave gives the ting sound. Instead of that, the light comes on. So they have done all these changes, and they've been very successful. Finally, SnapDeal, a local company, has, just out of the kindness of their heart, they heard about a village which was not getting enough water, so they went and dug like 15 bore wells in that village. And just totally expecting nothing in return. And the entire village got together and decided they would call their village SnapDeal.com. Because they said, I'm going to show the local government how little they're doing, how this one company has done. They could not have paid for this kind of advertising, But they didn't go out to get that. They truly went out. The point is that you need to do it with the true heart. You can't do it by lip service. You can't just say, well, I do CSR where, I just give out 50,000 products of mine at cost. I mean, that doesn't cut it. If you really do what's good for that community, understanding what is the local tradition, you always come out a winner. You will become a business leader. So I want to leave you with a few thoughts. First one is that, we all have an opportunity in the future to be wealthy and healthy. It doesn't have to be an either or, if we can just pay attention to what's around us. But we need to be really, really truthful to what we are. For centuries, Indian traditions have persisted. We right now are at an inflection point now. We are looking at the globalization, and we are saying to be developed, to be called something successful, We need to have the Prada bag. We need to have the Ferragamo shoes. We need to have global symbols of success. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think we should all have that. But along with that, just as we are willing to pay the premium for a Prada glasses, we should be willing to pay the premium for that weaver who is doing an amazing piece of work. We shouldn't bargain that while we succumb to the other very willingly. And I just want to leave you with a quote and a story. India not only opened our minds, she expanded our moral imagination. An ancient civilization of science and innovation, a fundamental faith in human progress. This is the sturdy foundation upon which you have built ever since that stroke of midnight when the tricolor was raised over a free and independent India. And despite the skeptics who said that this country was simply too poor, too vast, too diverse to succeed, you surmounted overwhelming odds and became a model to the world. Instead of succumbing to division, each person, each of us, each country must define what is their DNA, what is their tradition. In fact, it's funny, when I talked to James Cameron, he said that it's interesting how every culture thinks the movie Avatar came from their culture. So in some way, that's the beauty of America. You know, everybody wants to be like America. And everybody wants to be like somebody else who is successful. So, but I think we should all figure out what is our DNA. Each person should be very passionate about what they are. So I want to leave you with a small story of a boy who was given an assignment in a school. And the teacher says, write your dream. And the boy says, I'm going to have a horse farm that has thousands of horses, and it's going to win all the, competitions, etc. He writes this big thing, and he's like a second grade kid. And he gives it to the teacher. And the teacher says, this is a stupid dream. You'll never achieve this. Write something that is achievable for you. And he says, he gives the paper back to him. And the boy comes back the next day, and he says, the teacher says, did you rewrite it? He says, yeah. He gives the thing. It's the same paper. The teacher says, what is this? You gave the same paper to me. You know you're going to get an F. The kid says, you keep the F, I'll keep my dream. And I think we each need to keep our dream and move into the future while we take whatever it is that we define as our tradition. Thank you.
Thank you, Lakshmi, very much for the delightful textures of your colorful stories. That was fantastic.